It's really good. I'm just so glad and excited to be here with y'all today. And for those of you that don't know me at all, my name's Justin. I'm the executive pastor. And for those of you in the room, it's really exciting to be able to gather like this. And for those of you online, I'm really excited that you're with us in the room this way too. And your host, Suzanne, she's going to take great care of you. So if you've got questions or comments, reach out to her. And so as we keep going with our series, Rescuer, I want to start by recalling an international crisis that I watched during my freshman year of college at the University of Arizona. It was December 26th, it was the morning of December 26th, 2004, and there was a 10-minute long 9.1 earthquake just off the coast, undersea earthquake, just off the coast of Indonesia. And it sent 100-foot waves inland, across the coastline of both India, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and the devastation was massive. It was massive. It seemed to be unparalleled. The death toll at the end of it all, they speculate, almost 230,000. And as you looked at the images across the coastline, and they were making their way across news feeds and news coverage, it was cataclysmic. The infrastructure loss along the coasts of those countries was close to 66%, they thought. The loss of life and infrastructure was intense. And at that time, humanitarian agencies across the world, they scrambled to send aid, to send relief, to send help. And the thing is, 9,000 miles away in the relational circles that I ran in, people just had a lot of questions. There was just a bunch of questions. And the relational circle that I was in, I had a community of people that followed Jesus and had faith, and then there was a community of people that I had relationships with and friendships with that did not. And for this community over here, I was just I didn't have the best answers to their questions. I was maybe the closest person to ask, to get a faith perspective, or to hear about God. I became the token person they asked to get the answers to those questions. Not the most qualified, but the only one there. And these are the questions they were asking. How could God allow this? How could God do this? How could He allow this to happen? Why would God do this? And as they laid these questions at my feet, I didn't really know how to respond. And so then came the does He even exist questions. Does He even exist? Because the challenge for me and my faith at that time, and since I think I'd be able to respond to it now, but I was 19 at the time, I didn't know anything. I didn't have a category in my faith for those questions. I didn't have a category in my faith for pain that nobody seemed to have caused. I get cause and effect, but I didn't have a category for all of this. I didn't know how to respond to natural disaster, or for sickness, or for accident, or for tragedy. I just didn't know what to say, what to do. And as I think about their questions that they asked those years ago, today I think maybe the question behind the question, as it were, is maybe this question: where is God? It's maybe really the question, where is God? Where is God in our pain? And I think for so many people, man, pain can become a huge obstacle to faith. It becomes a big obstacle to faith. Because the thing about pain is it doesn't stay theological. It doesn't stay abstract. It doesn't get to stay philosophical. Pain always moves to the personal. Every one of us, we think back to our pasts, to growing up, all of us have been shaped by specific pain experiences. They've taken their toll. And you can recall them. And you can recall them in the lives of people you love. We've all had loved ones lost. Maybe we've experienced sickness, incurable sickness in people we love. Maybe we've seen a marriage fall apart or experienced a marriage fall apart. Maybe there are separations that break hearts that we would just long to put that relationship back together. And honestly, when the economy downturns, maybe there's a layoff and that creates grief. And that's a pain moment. Maybe if you live long enough, you will see maybe your parents begin to fail. And that's a pain moment. Maybe you see your kids begin to struggle, and that's a pain moment. Or maybe you just flat out have the struggle to have kids. And that creates a completely separate pain moment. For a lot of us, there is that moment in your past that's just etched there. It's what somebody did to you. It's what somebody said to you. It's how you were treated. And maybe you're not so much the victim as you are the perpetrator. And you're like, I am not that person anymore, and I'd go back in time if I could, but I can't. That pain is there. And that pain shaped that person and shaped you as well. See, pain doesn't stay philosophical. It always moves to the personal. And it's those pain moments that leave us. They leave us questioning God. Not just the where is God in this moment, but how am I supposed to believe that he loves me when I don't seem to see him doing anything in my pain? How am I supposed to feel that he loves me when I don't see him doing anything? Where is God in my pain? And there are those that give up on God because they say, you should have, but you didn't. And many people have stayed away from God because they say, you could have, but you didn't. And maybe you're somebody that hasn't given up on God, maybe you haven't stayed away, but see, pain is just so powerful. See, many followers of Jesus have been sidelined by pain because it has this innate ability to take the focus from Jesus to it. It's deafening. Pain has the power to overshadow everything else. And it leaves us asking the question a lot of the time, where is God? Where is God? That's the question we want to look at. It's a tough one. It's an uncomfortable question. It's the question we want to look at today as we keep going with our series, Rescuer. And this whole series is focusing on understanding the life that changed the world and how we can have a relationship with that rescuer. That's the purpose of the series. And today's story is a really tough one. It's a challenging one. It's an uncomfortable one. It epitomizes the where is God question, and maybe it captures it in a way no other story can. It's also a really key moment in the life of Jesus where we see the depth of his compassion on full display here in a really unique way. And so that's why I want us to look and examine at all of this together. And I think as we look at the story we're going to go into in just a moment, we're going to see three challenging truths that I want us to look at together. And I think if we'll surrender to them, what we'll find is an ability to see the love of God even in our pain, if we'll surrender to those truths. Now, that's a lot. We'll dive in and we'll get started here in just a second. We're going to be in the Gospel of John, starting in chapter 11. Now, John's an eyewitness of Jesus, so he's an eyewitness. He walked and learned from Jesus and saw these miracles up close. And so we're going to be in John 11. I'll just say, if you got your Bibles, awesome. If you have your phone, wonderful. If you have neither of those things, we'll put the verses up here. We just really want you to engage in the story with us and follow along. So let's jump into our story this morning. It says this, "Now a man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it says the sisters sent a message to him one day, right? Lord, the one you love is sick. The one you love is sick. I just think that's like, if you would like Jesus to do something for you, it seems like a nice way to ask, remember, you love us. Okay. Lord, the one you love. The one you love. Right? I mean, it kind of does that in the story. It sets up some expectations for what kind of care and attention that Mary and Martha and Lazarus could expect. A high level of care, a high level of attention. Remember, Jesus, I'm asking you for this, but you love us. Right? Oh, the relationship that Jesus had with this family, I mean, they may have supported him financially. They definitely ate together. They had meals together. There is a deep relationship here. That's what you can kind of surmise as you look at the story. When Jesus gets this message, this is what he says. When he heard it, he said, "This sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." You wouldn't send somebody to Jesus unless you were really, really sick. And he says the sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And if you're looking at that, you got to come to an awareness that Jesus is setting up a new category for bringing him glory. And it's sickness. Woo! That's not... Like, honestly, this is not like, you're laughing, I get it. It's not a popular category. No one's signing that up for that in the church lobby. Put my name on that list. I'm in, you know. I don't want, if I'm honest, this may be an opportunity, but I don't want to give God glory this way. I'm not tempted by this. I want to give God glory in the positive things of life. We got a softball league coming up. This is a quick plug for it. But I want to play softball. And growing up, I played baseball. I always wanted to hit the game-winning home run and then run around and be like, "I give you glory, Lord." And you want to do something spectacular or start a movement or change the world in some way, and at your acceptance speech, your Lifetime Achievement Award speech, "I give you glory, Lord," you know? I want people to tell me I have a beautiful family and then be like, "I give you glory, Lord." But there were a few years where my wife and I, we struggled with infertility. And I wasn't prone to want to give God glory in that. I didn't ask to be on that list. So however I feel about it, Jesus is presenting a category, a new category, as a way to give him glory. And then it comes back, right? This sickness won't end death, but it's for the glory of God, so the Son of Man may be glorified through it. And then in verse 5, it reminds us again. Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. Remember, the one you loved sick. Now it says, now Jesus, John's saying, no, it's true. He really did love them. And he loved them so much, this is what he does. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. He loved him so much he didn't do anything. What? How does that reconcile with how you see Jesus? That word "so," man, as I'm looking at it, it implies cause and effect, almost as if the fact that Lazarus was so sick, because of that, Jesus decided to wait. And you're like, but he loved him. How does this make sense? If you think about it, really think about it, it is uncomfortable. If you don't know the end of the story, which no one in the story did, and you may not even know the end yourself, this is an uncomfortable moment. There's uncomfortableness for me in this moment. And what's kind of tough is we can kind of see God use a pain experience or repurpose a pain experience, but in this moment, right, Jesus knew and Jesus waited. It almost seems like he takes a pretty active role in increasing the pain experience, which is weird, uncomfortable, tough. This is a one-of-a-kind experience. There's not quite recorded a time like this in the story of Jesus' life where he hesitates and waits like this. This is a one-of-a-kind. It's unique. And I think what makes this whole scene, this whole story, a little more uncomfortable is because maybe you can relate to the 2 more days. You can relate to the waiting and the pain. Maybe you can relate to the moments when you think prayer doesn't work because you're really, really thinking maybe no one's on the other side of that. When you're asking God to save a marriage, and you don't feel anything, you don't hear anything. When you're asking God to heal the cancer and it gets worse and worse. When you're asking and pleading with God to take care of your kids and set them back on the path, and they don't. They fall further from it. When you just straight up need a job, and interview after interview is rejection after rejection. Where you're asking Jesus to free you from an addiction, and it's just controlling your life. Those are the where are God moments. Where are you, Lord? The 2 days, the 2 more days, you know what those experiences are like. And if you are stuck asking the question in those 2 more days, where is God, long enough, it's easy to conclude, I don't know, but he's not here. It's uncomfortable. After those 2 days, after it, in verse 7, Jesus said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. And they say this, Rabbi, just now the Jews tried to stone you, and you're going there again. Well, first of all, we waited. Why not just wait a little bit longer? Also, which is, if you're talking to Jesus, if the disciples are still trying to figure out exactly who he is, but you got to think like he knows everything, and so you want to tell Jesus, how do you tell Jesus something you think he should be aware of with the concern that maybe he already knows about? It's like, Jesus, I think that you already know this, but we feel compelled to tell you anyway that they are trying to kill you in that place, so maybe we don't go? That's the question. Can we just heal him from a distance? Can't you just say it? That should work. And then Jesus says this. He said this, and he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. And if you don't want to go there anyway, you got to be like, well, that's great. If he's asleep, he'll wake right on up. We don't need to go there. In fact, if he's asleep, all the better. Guy's tired. It's good that he's getting some sleep. Poor guy's tuckered out. And then Jesus speaks to them more plainly. Jesus, however, was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about natural sleep. So Jesus then told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. And if you're the disciples, you got to be thinking, what's the point? Also, for our sake, so that we may believe? You may not understand what that necessarily means, but you got to be thinking, but what about Mary's sake? What about Martha's sake? What about Lazarus' sake? What about them? Yeah, like I said, it's an uncomfortable story. It gets even more uncomfortable. And if you're experiencing discomfort or uncomfort with the story of the way Jesus is looking right now, I understand. I'm not entirely sure I'm uncomfortable with the way everything rolls out in this particular story. And yet, in this series, Rescuer, we get to see the character of Jesus on display. We've seen it. And so we have to ask ourselves, when we get to uncomfortable stuff, when we see uncomfortable stuff or tough stuff, and rather than just conclude that God doesn't exist or that he's not real, we have to see how the pieces fit together. How does what I know about the character of Jesus true even in this passage? It's asking the how. How do these pieces fit together? And if you're uncomfortable, I get it. I'm a little uncomfortable too. But this is how I think the pieces fit together. And this is where we see our first challenging truth. And it's that God will allow your pain to bring him glory. God will allow your pain to bring him glory. I'm not saying that's a popular slogan on shirts. It's not comfortable, but I believe it to be accurate. Right? Following Jesus on this side of heaven is an uncomfortable experience. And there's no second half of that statement. It's just there. It's tough. And yet when we look at this, isn't it true that in the lives of people that we know and have relationships with, people that face the worst that life has to throw at them, the most painful experiences that life has to throw at them, and yet they have great faith, don't we admire them? Don't they inspire us? Don't they want to make us change or mirror that? We want that. But it's hard to come to grips with that truth. I don't know if any of you guys have seen any of these true classic tea ads that pop up on Facebook and other social media. Or if maybe Facebook is just tracking my analytics. And if you go to the next image, if we could. So the true classic, the concept, the idea behind these true classic tees, they are t-shirts that are designed to take your dad bod and make you look ripped. That's why I'm saying maybe they're tracking my analytics. So they're tighter in the arms and in the chest a little bit, and they let out in the stomach area. Epitomizes the dad bod, right? And these commercials that they're all talking about, these true classic tees, there's all these ripped dudes wearing them. They're all ripped. They're all putting so much effort at the gym. They're counting calories, whatever they do. And there's one character who's the dad bod character. I really relate to him. And I'm just thinking, you can put that shirt on if you want, dude, but it's not changing anything. Because there's just no substitute for putting in the hard work. And so I watch that commercial and I'm like tempted, is like, they're only like $30. Maybe I should buy 1,000 of them, like just wear true classic tees all the time. But I realize I've got to be willing to make some changes. It's not just that. It's not just magic. I have to be willing to make some changes, and I have begun to adjust some things. But similarly, see, we admire those faith stories in the face of great pain in the lives of others. We want that level of faith. We want to grow it. And yet, sometimes we can want to avoid the experiences that made that faith possible. That's what I'm saying. God will allow your pain to bring him glory. And if we're willing to make some changes, then I think what we need to do, I want to invite you to this, is to surrender your pain for God's glory. If he'll allow it to bring him glory, then surrender to it for God's glory. And when you do that, you get to decide what kind of story you want to be told with your life. What do you want your kids to say? What do you want your grandkids to say? What do you want people in your life to see when they look at it? You get to decide the story and how it unfolds. So I want to invite you to exchange it. Exchange your story for his. By declaring that if this is the way you desire to glorify yourself in my pain, Lord, I'm in. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's popular or comfortable, but I think it's true. Our next gen pastor and I, Jeff, we're reading a book called Hero Maker, and the whole purpose of that book is just saying you can try and be the hero of the story, or you can give up your life to make other people the hero of God's unfolding story. It's called Hero Maker. It's a really neat book, but there's a question that's just been echoing in my mind that I just keep coming back to. And I read it, and I asked myself this, and I just got to keep doing it. This is the question. Am I willing to defer my glory until the other side of heaven? Because even if you surrender your pain for God's glory and you think it'll all work out on this side of heaven, I'm not sure it will. So are you willing to defer your glory to the other side? It's an uncomfortable question. I'm still wrestling with it myself. But God will allow your pain to bring him glory, so surrender it for his glory. And as we get back to the story, it's in this moment where they're going back to town, the place where they tried to kill Jesus previously. And then Thomas, called Twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go so that we may die with him." Who invited that guy to the party? Like, when I hear Thomas speak sometimes, I almost hear like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. We'll probably die, but thanks for noticing. You know what I mean? Like, that's like Eeyore. But then, just I want him to get some love. At the same time, he hasn't seen Jesus crucified and rise from the dead yet, and yet he's willing to give up his life. That's friendship. Thomas is a great friend. He may not always be the life of the party, but he's a solid friend. And then Jesus arrived, and he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. 4 days was significant, because in Jewish custom and thought, 4 days, soul was definitely gone from the body. They were dead day 1, 2, 3, but on the 4th day, they were like dead, 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 dead. And Jesus had fed people, and he healed people, and he had taught people. And a few weeks ago, we looked at how he brought, if with us in the series, he brought Jairus' daughter back from the dead. But this was unique. No one had been dead this long. This hadn't happened before. The deck seemed stacked against Jesus in this moment. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. And as soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to him. She went to meet him. But Mary remained seated in the house. And this is going to be a tense moment. We'll get there in a little bit. Martha goes out there. Mary's like, nope. Difference in the sister's reaction. And Martha said to Jesus, she meets him, and she says to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Talk about the where is God question to his face. Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And maybe you've said something like this to God before. If you just would have helped, if you just would have listened, if you just would have heard me, if you just would have noticed, if you just would have loved me, if you just would have cared, you can fill in the blank with whatever. But a lot of us have had this conversation with God, and Martha gets to speak to Jesus face to face. And it's tough, and it's raw, but there's such a statement of faith right after this. Look at this. She says this, if you'd have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. But even now, after all these days, he's been dead. Even now. And Jesus says this, your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. And Martha said, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. I understand he's going to rise again. Jesus, you told us that. I'm quoting you, Jesus. You said that he would be raised at the last day. You said that a number of times. I've been listening. So I get that. She understands that. Do you see kind of what she's doing? And a little bit, Jesus is speaking to her, and yet there's this tendency. She's in the past for a moment. It's kind of like if you would have been here, something would have happened. And then she shoots right forward to the future of just saying, I know things will get better. And think about you and I in our pain. It's very easy to dwell in the past on it, where nothing but bitterness and anger and frustration and pain live. Or it's easier to just gloss right over it and shoot forward in the future. We think at some point it'll be better. But it is very difficult to be right in the middle of it and experience God. It's hard to stay there. We want to escape it. And so Jesus, she looks at the past, she looks at the future, and Jesus takes her right back to the present. And this is what he says. I love this. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. I'm the resurrection and the life. This is the reality now, in the present. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And let me just say this. If you're here and you're wrestling with who Jesus is, and you're not sure about who he is, you've heard some things, and maybe your conclusion is, I think he has some loving things to offer. I think he is a good communicator, a good teacher. I'll just say this. No good teacher could say this and still be a good teacher unless it is absolutely true. Unless he really is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Then he's the Christ, the Son of the living God, who also happens to be an amazing teacher. Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. And I like this, ever. Do you believe this? Do you trust me, Martha? Do you trust me? It's the trust me stage. And she says, I love this. Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God who comes into the world. Jesus asks her, do you believe this? Do you believe this? And she says, I believe you. I believe in you. I trust you. I don't know where else to go. And in those moments, she looked not to her situation, which didn't look that good in that moment, but she looked to someone, not to a situation, but a someone. And I believe this points the way towards that second challenging truth, which is this, that God will use your pain to grow your relationship with him. He'll allow it to bring him glory, and he will use it to grow your relationship with him. C.S. Lewis kind of describes or speaks to pain this way in his book, The Problem of Pain. He says this: we can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. He uses it. He uses it. He draws people to himself. He wakes people up. Again, none of this is comfortable, but I believe it to be accurate and I believe it to be true. He doesn't cause the pain, but he will repurpose it and he will use it in order to build a relationship with him. And it's hard to accept, but if you think about it in context for just a moment, all the pain experiences that you have, they are temporary. At some point, they will end. And yet what Jesus is offering is a relationship that starts now and lasts forever. So a temporary pain and an eternal relationship. It's no wonder that God will leverage everything for that relationship because it matters. It's more important because it lasts forever. I know this isn't comfortable, but I believe it to be true. God will use your pain to grow your relationship. And so then the invitation is to surrender your pain for God's use. Surrender your pain for him to use. When we experience pain, we can draw closer to Jesus or we can allow it to drive us further from him. And you know people in your life who've chosen one or the other, and the choice is yours. I want to invite you to surrender it for God to use. Build that relationship. That's what he's using it for. And then Jesus has an interaction with the other sister, Mary. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. This is the ultimate where is God moment. And Martha hold it together, but Mary throws herself down at Jesus' feet and she's weeping and she's crying. And this is really where we see the full depth of Jesus' compassion on display in a powerful way. When Jesus saw her crying, and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was angry in his spirit and deeply moved. Where have you put him? He asked. Lord, they told him, come and see. And verse 35 says Jesus wept. And if you're going to memorize a verse today, start with that one. Jesus wept. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't offer cliches. He didn't downplay it. He didn't discount any of the pain that she was experiencing. He just sat there with her in it, and he wept with her. And maybe when we experience people in pain, maybe we should just do that. I always want to say the right thing, but maybe it's just best to cry alongside them. And it says Jesus was angry in that passage. I don't know entirely, I'm not entirely sure why he was angry or what that points to, and far be it for me to tell Jesus how he feels. It seems dangerous. I think maybe he was so angry because he's looking at this situation unfold, and it's not how he set things up, because it says Jesus holds all things together. He was there at creation. All things were made through him and by him. If that's true, then he's looking at this painful situation unfold, realizing this is what happens when sin and death enter and corrupt the world. And he's looking, he's like, this is not the way, this is not how it was meant to be for the crown jewel of my creation. And he knew there was a day coming where he'd wipe tears from all eyes and restore all things, but it wasn't that day. And people that he loved were in pain. And that made him frustrated, I think. Maybe that's why he was angry. I don't know. But when all this happened, see, the Jews looked at it and said, see how he loved him. We see it all the way through, right? The one you love is sick. Now Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And now the Jews are looking at it and saying, see how he loved him. And I think this points us to a third challenging truth, which is this, that God expresses his pain to reveal his love. He expresses his pain to reveal his love. Love for Mary and Martha and Lazarus, it was always there, even when the story felt awkward. Jesus loved them. And let me just say this, I believe the good news of God's love for us in this story is this, that Jesus knows exactly what it's like to be you. He knows what it's like to feel pain. He knows what it's like to feel betrayal and rejection and to not fit in and like nobody wants you. He gets all of that stuff. And the cross is the moment where he identified with that pain to the full extent, and he carried the weight on his shoulders. He knows exactly what it's like to be you and I. And we got to believe that. Because if he's going to chart a course through our pain, we have to trust that he knows what it's like to play the game. You don't want a coach that doesn't know the rules of a game and has never played. That's a bad coach. And Jesus is a good one. God expresses his pain to reveal his love. And so you and I want to invite us to surrender to God's love to endure your pain. What we think it looks like for God to love us well isn't always what God thinks it looks like for him to love us well. There's misalignment there. What I think and what he thinks, they're sometimes very different. I have a 3-year-old son. I have 4 kids, and one of them is a 3-year-old little boy. His name's Levi. And when he turned 3 in January, he decided he wanted to start put on all his own clothes himself, which you think would be a blessing. But he started putting on everything backwards. So he puts on his underwear backwards, which is very uncomfortable for him. And then he puts on his pants backwards, so he's got his pockets right in the front. And so you try to course correct it and be like, dude, you can't grow up. Like, you can't be 30, go to your first job interview and have your pants on backwards. You don't get the job, you know? So I'm trying to course correct, I'm trying to teach him, I'm trying to show him and help him, and he gets frustrated. Because I'm doing it because I love him. He doesn't see it that way. I'm doing that because I love him. He doesn't see it that way. His understanding of what it means for me to love him and my understanding of what it means to love my son, they're very different sometimes. See, if we look at the circumstances in our life and conclude that God does not love us, it's really hard to endure the pain. So I think we just need to start with a different presupposition, which is God loves me, and then we look everywhere. We trust him, and we look everywhere in our story and say, oh, this is really tough, but I know that you love me. Let me look for that love. Let me see where you love me. Just think it reshapes our minds and lets us see it and gives us a strength to endure, because that's kind of an essential element of great faith, is believing that God loves me when I don't feel very loved. My feelings may be real. That doesn't mean they're true. And my feelings can be fickle. They're really your feelings, but they may not be accurate. The story's tough, but everything we see in it, it starts from a foundation. Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and what you're going to see is tough, but he loved them. We got to surrender to it. Surrender to that love to endure that pain. The Apostle Paul, and you've maybe seen this verse before, but I'll just throw it at you. We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So we've maybe heard this, we've said this, we've put this on our Facebook or Instagram feed, right? God works all things out for good. God works all things out for good for those who love him and serve according to his purpose. But look at the next verse. He works all things out for good, but this is the grand scheme of his love, to be conformed to the image of his son. Where does his love lead? There. His love leads to be conformed to the image of his son. So him loving you and I is not pain-free lives. Him loving us means he is conforming us to the image of his son, Jesus, and he will repurpose and allow and reconfigure all of our pain experiences in order to bring that to be, because that's what it means to love us. Surrender to God's love to endure your pain, and you will experience, I believe, you'll experience the love of God like never before. Here's the end of the story. Then Jesus, angry in himself again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. "Remove the stone," Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, "Lord, he's already decaying. It's been 4 days." And the King James Version says, "Lord, he stinketh." Lord, he stinketh. And Jesus said to her, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And it all comes back full circle to the very beginning. And so they removed the stone. Then Jesus prays, and he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, and with his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go, because that's got to be uncomfortable. And the disciples were eyewitnesses to it, and Mary and Martha were eyewitnesses to it. All the Jews that were there, they were eyewitnesses to it, and Lazarus was an eyewitness to it. And that guy's got a great story to tell. How do you one up that at a dinner party? What do you do for a living? Oh, one time I came back from the dead. You win. You just win. And it says, therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. The thing is, where this story leads us, though, is this is the beginning of the end for Jesus. This is the beginning of the end, because some Jews believed, but there were a lot that got really jealous, and they conspired to kill him. And about a week later, he was crucified and put in a tomb. The Infinite One, bearing the weight of all of our pain and all of our sin and our brokenness on his shoulders. And yet the good news comes in when the fact that, as we sang earlier today, that tomb was empty because of a resurrection. And that was the proof that validated everything he said about himself. When he says, I'm the resurrection and the life, the empty tomb validated that. It proved it was so. And you and I, if you're a follower of Jesus and you trust him, you believe in him, we'll get to see him on the other side of heaven someday. Because he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And you and I will be able to boldly declare, oh, death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? Because it's not here. And that's good news. Yeah, God will allow your pain to bring him glory. God will use your pain to grow your relationship with him. And God expresses his pain to reveal his love. Now, what you and I do with that, I think there is one thing. And it's not easy, and it is not comfortable, and yet those challenging truths give us good reason to do what I'm going to ask us to do. And it's this: surrender your pain to God. Surrender it. Let it go today. Yeah, surrender it for his glory. And you get to choose what story's told, what other people will say, the way people will remember. You get to choose that legacy of faith. Surrender your pain to God for his glory. Surrender your pain to God for his use, because he's using it to build a relationship, and that is what lasts forever. And then surrender your pain to God because he loves you more than you'll ever know, like no one else can. Surrender your pain to God. When you ask the question, where is God in my pain? I'll just say this. Rather than say not here, trust that he is with you, and surrender your pain to God. Surrender your pain to him. And communion, it becomes this opportunity for us to surrender our pain to God as Jesus surrendered on our behalf. He surrendered for our sakes. This is what communion becomes, an opportunity for us to recognize this. The night before Jesus was betrayed and crucified, he went to pray with his disciples, and he prayed so intensely there were sweat drops of blood in this moment. And yet, in that moment, with the intensity of prayer, he says, Lord, if there's any other way, Father, if there's any other way this cup can pass from me, please take it. But not, he says this is a wonderful prayer of surrender. Not my will, but yours be done. And in that moment, Jesus surrenders. He surrenders to bring the Father glory. He surrendered not that so he could build a better relationship with his Father, but so that you and I could be brought in and have that relationship. And he surrendered full of confidence that the Father loved him regardless of what the next day would look like. So in a moment, we're going to have an opportunity. If you've got the little packets, I always forget. I remembered it today. I'm going to pray in just a moment, and we're going to be able to take the bread and the juice representing his blood and his body. And this is a great way when I pray, if you'd like to slip back there and grab one yourself. If you're online with us, grab what you have that's closest to this. And as we take it and as we eat, we choose to trust that Jesus has experienced everything that we've experienced. We choose to trust in him as we go through our pain, and we choose to surrender our pain for his purpose. Let me pray, and then let's take this and celebrate together. Father, thanks for loving us like no one else could. Thanks for being right there for us in our pain. Give us eyes to see you at work. Fill us with the confidence that you love us. Help us to surrender to that love and find the strength to endure every ounce of pain coming our way. Help us to wrap our minds, come to grips with these truths. Thank you for who you are, how much you love us. There's no one like you, Jesus. We pray this in your name. Amen.